Our guest today is the CEO and co-founder of Shippo, Laura Behrens Wu. Shippo is a unicorn in e-commerce enablement and offers merchants multi-carrier shipping software so they can compete with giants like Amazon on delivery experience. Over 100,000 brands trust Shippo to make sure their customers love how their products are delivered. So, Laura, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yes, and we always start with the origin story of companies like Shippo, and you started it way back in 2014 as a 24-year-old.
Yep.
I was barely tying my shoelaces when I was 24. So please tell us more about how Shippo was born.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Germany, and so is my co-founder. Yeah. The two of us went to school together in Switzerland, actually. And I have dabbled a little bit in startups there. And at some point, I was just very curious about what it's like to work in a startup in San Francisco. I started just thinking about working for a company in SF, and I started looking around of how to make that dream happen. And AngelList was like the most obvious way to get started. So I created my account on AngelList. I started applying for companies. And unfortunately, I did not hear back from any company through that. So I kept trying, didn't really work. I started going to founder conferences or startup conferences. And then by pure chance at a conference in Switzerland, I ran into a Y Combinator founder. That was like a really lucky coincidence because we had a good conversation and the person volunteered to send my resume to the YC mailing list. And overnight, I got a whole lot of good responses, mostly for internship positions. And I started interviewing with YC companies that were super early stage and got a summer internship at a fintech company in San Francisco. So that allowed me to come over and experience working at a San Francisco startup firsthand. It was a very early stage company right out of YC, like having raised their seed round and now looking to raise a Series A in the future. And it was a really awesome experience. I had a great time there. And from there, this is a long-winded way to tell a Shippo story, but from there, I was talking with my now co-founder about starting our own company. I was really inspired by the San Francisco startup environment. And the two of us were brainstorming about what kinds of companies we could start where we could have good founder market fit. And we couldn't really come up with any revolutionary ideas. So we just decided to start an e-commerce company, just an e-commerce store. Nothing too special. Let's just start selling things on the internet and see what happens. So we built our store using Shopify, using Stripe, and started selling products on the internet. We had a bigger vision of what that should look like, but the first iteration was really just sell products on the internet and see what happens. And that was the first time we dealt with shipping. And the experience was subpar. Like we had to go to USPS, stand in line, hand over our packages. It was not really the kind of the seamless experience provided by a Shopify or a Stripe. And then started looking into software tools to fix that. And I think to our surprise, there was no good or no super intuitive, easy to use software tool to help us figure out which shipping provider is best, how to ship our packages, how to do it from home. And yeah, we started thinking about shipping as a problem for the first time back then. And at some point, just started talking to other online merchants, asking them how they're doing shipping and validating our idea. It seemed like it is a really big problem. Like every single e-commerce store needs to ship. There's no way around that. And when we heard from other online merchants that they were having a hard time as well, we decided to just drop our online store and focus on building shipping software full time. So that's the origin story. It's been a windy road, since we decided that it was not a straight path for us. But yeah, we've been building, we started working on our MVP sometime in 2014 and got some customers as early as possible. Yeah, and have been scaling it since.
Really amazing. I think I really love the way that you found authenticity while just trying to build something and discovered that there are probably millions of people exactly in your position going through
Yes.
the same awful shipping experience. So now, obviously, the big focus of this show is this idea of finding product market fit. And we typically divide it into roughly two stages. So, first, what is the unique, radical idea you have around solving a problem? What was the
Mhm.
approach that you needed to validate, test, and
Right.
see if it actually works and delivers on its promise? And then second, who is like the desperate customer who is willing to give a less than a year old startup a try, and like why do they represent an attractive market segment? Could
Yeah.
you break these two down for us? What was your approach in that product market fit journey? And what were some of the early, maybe surprises or experiences you had that really informed your strategy?
Yeah, for sure. And then, as I said, it was like a windy road. It was not a straight path. So we have a lot of good learnings from there. What we're building right now, like what we're setting, what we're building right now, and our goal, our vision, is to build the shipping layer of the internet. And that sounds like a pretty grand vision, but I want to like bring it back to where we started. Like when we started building this, our thought was, okay, like we're having a hard time shipping and other e-commerce merchants are having a hard time shipping as well. How do we take this from here? And first we were looking around and we like tried to look at other companies that were comparable. And we thought, okay, so maybe buying a shipping label could be like buying an airline ticket. So maybe we should build the kayak for shipping. That was our first thought. And we started building something there, showed it to a few customers, and the feedback was like they're shipping hundreds of packages a day. Like, and buying like one label after another is really not helping them. So that was a good just feedback point or data point from our customers or potential future customers. So we went back to the drawing board and we were like, okay, so how do we enable like merchants to buy like many shipping labels a day in an automated way without them having to go through a dashboard every time? And back at that point in time, like a bunch of enterprise or B2B API companies were on the rise. So you're looking at Stripe, at Twilio, thought that was like a really good analogy for what we're doing here as well. So how about we built the Twilio for shipping? And that was like started focusing on or started like iterating on that idea, building an API that connects to different shipping providers. And at the beginning, it was really just a wrapper around existing APIs, making them like easier, more developer friendly, easier to use, better documentation. And I think around the pain point, it's really that a lot of these shipping APIs are like kind of you have to be some kind of shipping expert to understand how to read the documentation. You have to write in for access to the API docs, or API keys. It's not super developer friendly. So removing that friction, we thought was going to be a good first step. And I think the other part though is like a lot of our customers, they want to buy shipping labels from multiple different shipping providers, not
Right.
just from one. So that's the other pain point. It's like if you integrate one API, that's pretty hard. But then you have to integrate 3, 4, 5, 6 APIs. That's even more difficult. So that was, I think, in theory, a pretty good idea. And we started talking to customers with our like first iteration of the API. And we learned that customers who could integrate the API are probably further along in their journey and would not really trust like an API that has zero shipping volume going through it. And that was our first problem. Like the idea resonated, but a lot of these customers were asking, like, how many packages are you already shipping? Like, how much, like, how scalable is this? And given that shipping is an essential part of their infrastructure, it was hard to get them to trust an API with not a ton of volume or almost like zero volume going through it.
Right.
So
So it
I
sounds
think,
that they already had enough technical resources at hand so they could actually use your APIs, but
yeah,
that itself also disqualified them
yes,
from any desperate
yeah,
enough customer for you, right? Like,
totally,
amazing. Please
totally.
go on.
Yeah. So that was, again, a really interesting realization because the idea resonated with these types of customers, but we're not willing to trust us, given that we didn't have enough credibility in terms of just volume and low like scale coming through the API that we're offering. And then at the same time, we were also talking to customers who like said, this is a great idea, but I have no idea what an API is. I would use this tomorrow, but I don't have any developer to integrate an API. And then I think that was where we found the desperate customers. Okay, this is a store or a merchant that is small enough where this is a real pain point, but we have to make it easy for them because the API, integrating an API is a non starter. It's not something they can do. They're not technical enough. So we decided to build an app on top of the API and just connect that to the Shopify App Store. And we really just started with the Shopify App Store because is a good way to validate. Right now, like at this point, we have connections to a whole lot of different app stores, but at that point in time, we just chose one to validate this idea. And through that, we found like really small customers where they weren't concerned about how many packages are already going through Shippo. They're like, it was so easy to install and connect that they were able to start shipping within minutes. And that's where we started getting our first customers, getting volume through that. And then over time, because we started shipping with those SMBs first, we were able to start telling potential API customers that there is actually volume coming through the API, that we have a good amount of customers using it, even though they were using the app, which in turn was a client of the API. So yeah, that's the journey. Right now we have API customers, we have app customers, we have platforms that are using our API. But in order for us to like jumpstart this, we had to build an app on top of the API because no one was willing to integrate an API that was not validated or not unproven.
Makes sense. That very interesting kind of shift in positioning, your product
Yeah.
roadmap, like
Yeah.
changing all that. Tell me a little
But I
bit
think at
about.
that point in time, like there was no real no the team was so small. It was like my co-founder, myself, and one or two other people that there was no real product roadmap. There was nothing that we were shifting super dramatically. We're talking to customers pretty early and frequently. And then through that, just a lot of these things, like the first iteration of the app was maybe built in a day or two. And we're still dealing with that sort of tech debt,
Right.
but it got us to market pretty fast.
Makes sense. And so maybe segueing to team, like, how did you think about once you had that early set of small customers starting to use the product? How did you think about team fundraising? Like, what was it that you needed to make sure that you could get to the next phase? And how did you even think about next phase metrics? Like, what did those early days look like?
Yeah. So in those early days, we focused on a single metric. And I think that's where founders can go wrong. Like at this point in time, we're optimizing across like a variety of different metrics. At that point in time, we're saying just we're picking one metric and we're going to grow that metric week over week. And our metric at that point in time was label volume.
Mm.
So just top line label volume. And when we connected it when we built our app and connected that to the Shopify App Store, like we started getting a good amount of just customers giving it a try. Because I was doing customer support myself, I asked people to leave reviews, and we're having like really authentic conversations with our customers, including telling them that we're like an SMB just like them. We're a person team. We're just trying to build this, and we really like benefit from them helping with spreading the word, leaving customer reviews, sharing this with other people. And through word of mouth and positive customer reviews, we got a good amount of traction just purely through the Shopify App Store. And we're focused on growing like shipping labels week over week with that growth rate that looked like really nice. It looked like like the perfect hockey stick growth rate. We're able to start raising like a seed round from San Francisco investors. And that point in time, it was Uncork and Version One Ventures who led the seed. And I think over time, we learned that you have to focus on not just on label volume, you have to focus on net revenue, you have to focus on gross margins, you have to focus on a whole lot of other like set of metrics. But it was really important that at that like moment, we're just focused and just trying to validate one thing, which is that people are using this to buy shipping labels.
Makes sense. And if you had to go back to those early days of Shippo now, after everything that you have learned in the past 8 years, do you think you would have done anything differently? I'm curious. Maybe not, but anything
Oh,
that
that's fair.
stands out to you as, oh, still paying off those debts?
That's really in the earliest days. No, I think my overall philosophy is we did make a whole lot of mistakes. And I think that the majority of mistakes were probably hiring mistakes, but it got us to where we are here. I think reflecting on hiring, it's been a good learning for me to know that like different people, like there are people who are good at building and people who are good at scaling. And you have different profiles at different stages. And I think early on, we're pretty impressed with, oh, this person like was at Facebook before, was at Google before. If they're good enough for Google, they must be good enough for Shippo. And it turns out that Google is just at a very different stage, and the kind of person you need there or who would succeed in that environment is very different compared to a person who's successful in this like startup stage environment. So I think that was a good learning experience just around hiring.
I would love to dig into that a little bit more because I think this is by far probably the most common hiring mistake I see early
Yes.
stage founders make. And there is some value in getting advice from people who have seen scale as well. So it's an easy mistake to
Yeah.
make. What were some of the kind of profiles that worked really well for you? What were the characteristics of your early hires that, looking back, like if you are advising another founder starting a company again, you would say, this is
Yeah.
what you should look for in your first 10,
Yeah.
first 20 hires?
Yeah. So I think it's a mix between like people who are just pretty hungry. Like there is some kind of, ideally they have some kind of work experience and in a, like in another startup, but just people who are pretty hungry, smart and able to pick things up fast, able, like willing to get their hands dirty and wear a ton of different hats, especially in this early stage environment. Like someone who is not too good to make their own presentation or jump in for another coworker, even though the coworker is on a totally different team. And that is, I think that's it's a pretty rare, it's a pretty like specific profile. And it starts with, yeah, they might not have as much experience, but they're willing to learn and they're willing to like get their hands dirty and really get in the weeds and understand what's going on and figure it out. I think that the sad truth though is that the majority of these people are really good at that stage
Right.
and might not scale to the next stage. So that is, there is, as as the company grows into a different phase, you will need different kinds of people.
Makes sense. I'd love to bring us a little bit into the future or recent past right now with the pandemic. Was that a big tipping point for Shippo's business, or what was it like just making decisions around this complex problem of shipping with
Yeah.
all the chaos that the pandemic brought to the logistics industry as a whole?
Yeah. I think from the pandemic at a high level, what happened was that everyone, because they were staying at home, were starting to order on the
Right.
internet. And that just increased e-commerce volumes, like more people were buying on the internet, long-term habits might have been formed. And that then leads to more people shipping things. And then the shipping providers being like, they only have a certain amount of capacity because these are offline businesses where capacity is not just something you can scale up as easily, but you have to buy more trucks, hire more people to do that. You know, and these offline businesses were, or like logistics companies were already in a crunch because like with the pandemic, like people might be sick, they might be out, they're not like, there's not that much of a workforce available. So I think for us, we saw just all of our customers shipping more than before. That was a big one because they were selling more, shipping more, people buying from them. The other one is we saw a whole lot of new customer signups, which is that like previously offline businesses were moving online at a rapid pace in order to still be able to reach their customers. And then we saw just, yeah, our on the supply side, our shipping providers trying to keep up with the influx of shipping volume and building up all of that and having to build up all of that capacity. It was interesting for us to, I started hearing the term essential service for the first time in my life. And it's like shipping is an essential service. And it's interesting to think about it that way because earlier in the show or in this recording, we talked about something that's a real pain point and solving a real pain point. And yeah, like shipping is such a big pain point that it is an essential service. And I think that was for sure like a good realization and a good rallying cry for the team as well. That even though everyone was like adapting to this new reality of working from home and this uncertain environment, we are providing an essential service and our customer in line with our value of helping our customers win. Like our customers need to go first here.
Makes sense. How did you think about what's happening in the larger supply chain industry? You were at this nexus and had a great view of what was going on. What were some of your observations and kind of opportunities maybe that Shippo can take advantage of in the future?
Yeah. So I think what we saw was that there are a lot of new shipping providers being formed. Like one person's problem is another person's
Right.
opportunity. It's like the problems of the shipping providers that they were at capacity led to new shipping providers being able to step up and either build up capacity faster and become more significant or new shipping providers forming in the first place. And there were a lot of startups actually that were built during that period of time or that became more popular during that period of time that were providing shipping services. So like from our end, like the takeaway there is having a network of different shipping providers is super important because if one shipping provider has a crunch, then we're able to always shift volume to another one and make sure that our customers are like always covered and don't have to stop shipping. Yeah, I think other than that, like it's interesting now also seeing coming out of the pandemic. No one predicted the pandemic. No one predicted that this would be like we would get into a recession afterwards. So it's interesting to see what kinds of consumer behaviors are sticking. And like right now, our like e-commerce growth is for sure slowing, and probably we'll see a little bit of reduced e-commerce growth for over the course of the next few months.
Makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about how you think about learning how to be a leader, right? Like, I think, especially though for those of us who join startups, we are often always that hungry doer persona when we first start a company or join an early stage startup. And I've always felt that CEO is the only role where you have no excuse. Like you need to just evolve and become a different person every
Yeah.
6 months as you're
Yes.
scaling the
Yes.
business because the business needs you to be a different person as it grows. How do you invest in your own evolution? What have been some role models, coaches, books? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah. So let's see. I think the big upside about San Francisco that I for sure benefited from was that there are a whole lot of founders around here. It's really easy to meet other founders. And the VCs do a pretty good job of connecting the portfolio. And anywhere you go, you could run into a founder, and people are typically very open about sharing their experiences. And I get for me personally, like talking through what's going on with another founder who's gone through the same thing or is going through the same thing is very like refreshing and therapeutical because you realize that it's not just a problem that you are facing yourself, but it's a common problem that typically all founders are facing. I think that's been a good realization of just like the majority of problems that I'm facing or Shippo is facing are very common, and every other founder is probably going through the same thing. And then I've also been able to work with an executive coach since like for a few years now, and that's been extremely helpful as well. Just having someone there who you can talk through some of your problems in a more structured way and get a good gut check of does this sound right? Am I totally off?
And what would be your advice to other first time seed stage founders right now? They're getting started. It's 2022. There's a recession, but
Yeah.
there's also a lot of money in the market. Well, what would be your
Yes.
advice?
That's it. I think my main advice would be to not get distracted by like the all the macro stuff that's going on. Like it is good companies or great companies are being built in a bear market. So I think now is a great time to build a company as long as you're focused and you're not distracted. I think it's pretty good actually for everyone to have a forcing function and just focus on what really matters. I think when there's a lot of money out there, you can get distracted building many things like over hiring people. So it's good to maintain that focus on what really matters for your business, what you need to validate. What else? I think it sounds like there's a consensus that we'll come out of this recession fairly fast, that this will be a quick thing. So fingers crossed that this is a quick thing. And I think once like in a year or two, like the funding environment should be to fully normal. And I'd say like preserving the runway to get to the next 18 months and come out of that is like top of mind for everyone, not just seed stage founders.
Awesome. But thank you so much for spending time with us, Laura, today. This was so refreshing. And I really enjoyed talking with you. And I think our founders will also find this super helpful. Thank you so much.